Hey, I'm Sven Masterson, one of the co-founders and mentors in the Mentoring Men community, and I show men how to transform painful, broken, dying, and disconnected relationships into passionate, thriving, intimately connected, and enjoyable relationships. In the video you're about to see, I am speaking to one of the men in our community, or perhaps a client, and answering an inquiry perhaps that this man made. I say perhaps because this is going to be at the front of a lot of videos, and I want you to understand that the context may seem a little bit weird because I'm talking to really one man in this video, but I'm doing so in such a way that I hope you, the viewer on social media, can ascertain what's going on, but also receive some benefit and some insights along the way. I would ask if you get something out of this, if you please would ding the bell, subscribe, leave comments, hit the like button, all that stuff. That helps us get information in front of the right people on the internet, people who really need hope, people who need transformation, and I would really love it if we could get that message in front of more people. Thank you, and I'll see you soon. Hey brother, I wanted to respond to you and kind of summarize some thoughts I had about your dilemma. And I'm going to repeat it kind of back to you on video, because I'm also going to make this video to share with other men, because a common question that we get in some derivative, and I think it would have value for other people to hear. So your chief complaint, your complaint statement is that my wife says I don't meet her needs. And what do I do? What do I do when she says I don't meet her needs? This comes up, I think, in every marriage at some point. We've talked before about stages of marriage, and I would kind of broadly think that a marriage has two main halves. It's not necessarily equal in length, but two main stages. If they're going to survive, they'll have two. The first half is what I would call the Eros half, which is characterized by transactional love. I use the word love loosely there. It's the giving to get. I exchange giving you things so that you give me things. And as you know, and as you're experiencing, this way of relating for the long term does not create intimacy, doesn't create connection, doesn't create abiding, deep, satisfying love. It doesn't create really the things that we want in life. But it's how all of us start a relationship with a woman usually. The second half of marriage is what I would call the Agape stage. It's when, if you do the work to have this metamorphosis from Eros, you can experience this beautiful new stage. And it really is a metamorphosis, and like a metamorphosis, you use the things from the first stage to become, or to become the substance of the second stage. In the Agape stage, or what in Mentoring Men we would call the unconditional high regard stage of marriage or a relationship, you've let go of the transactional giving to get, behavior-driven way of treating one another. You've let go of dependencies. You've taken the power back that you gave each other in that very enmeshed stage. You're owning yourself. She's owning herself. And now the characteristics of your love are different. They're actually born out of unconditional high regard, or this agape idea, which means it's a giving that is not sourced in the behavior of the recipient, but in the nature and desires of the giver. So, for example, I like to be generous. And in the Eros stage of my marriage, I would only be generous to my wife when her behavior appeared to be worthy of generosity. In fact, a lot of people think that's just how it goes, but that is an awful way to live, because it makes you create this ledger. And that ledger is like, I did this for her and she didn't respond that way. I'm not doing that again. And you start keeping this ledger of complaints and wins or whatnot, for lack of a better word. And it becomes the basis for resentment, contempt, for irritation, frustration, for a sense of entitlement, and you start to have this kind of internal mechanism of like, I'm giving you a quantity of X and you're not giving me enough Y back. And I think that's where you're living right now. I know from working with you that you're moving away from this. You're learning how to let go of Eros and how to move into Agape. And the way it's done in a marriage is that somebody has to go first. I think it's very uncommon, maybe even not possible, to see a couple have this transformation at the same time. And in my work with men, I find there's a sequence to it rather, which is you need to get the man to think this way and change his understanding and his behavior to move from Eros to Agape. He'll do so. That's stage one. Stage two is like, well, she's still stuck in transactional Eros thinking while he's in a high regard thinking. That's, in my opinion, the hardest stage, because you're trying to let go of Eros and your partner is still there. And there's some other synonymous things happening here. So in this same stage of relationship, a man has left the drama triangle and he's living in an empowered dynamic, but his partner is still in the drama triangle. So she's constantly trying to like invite him back into enmeshment, invite him back into this dynamic where he already knows it can't work. And it could be really confusing to understand that stage. Stage three is when both of you are living in the Agape or UHR stage. And it's really a time that is very sweet because it's filled with acceptance, appreciation. You have the maturity as individuals to know, hey, I own my emotions. They're not caused by you. You might be the occasion for me feeling them, but they're fundamentally mine. And so you let go of all this contempt. You come to an understanding that I'm always experiencing me. I'm not experiencing you. You're not doing this to me. You're not making me feel bad. You're not making me feel disconnected. I'm just feeling disconnected. And I now know it's on me. That's a huge transition to make. And, I've been in a relationship almost 32 years. And, wow, how difficult. I would say I spent over the first 20 years in that first stage. And it was the crisis of a marriage falling apart, which is there usually is a crisis, that triggers the opportunity to move from Eros to Agape. Many people mistake what's going on. They just kind of lament and mourn that Eros died, and they separate. They move out of the relationship. Nobody actually moves into this sweeter way of being as a human and in a relationship, which is to be in this agape, unconditional regard space. And so I want to speak to you knowing that you're in stage two of those three stages, because one of the complexities of the stage you're in is that you've learned that your emotional insides are not your wife's fault, which is, as you know, very liberating to have experienced. It's wonderful to have finally understood that you feel pain because of your insides, and wonderfully, you have the capacity to address that without actually needing someone else to change. So I don't need to sit here in this video and convince you all of the benefits of having, of differentiating from your partner, of learning to let go of blame and judgment and animosity, and to learn to own your insides, why and how pain comes about, but also how happiness comes about. And so when a man has done that, a man in our community especially, he has really embraced a spirit of ownership. He's taken ownership for himself, and that is a good development. However, he can tend to see for a while that all needs are bad. And I want to clarify in the rest of this video a little bit more about needs, because you have needs, your partner has needs, and it's important to be able to distinguish between kinds of needs and what our relationship is to them. And this is an area that I think is oftentimes misunderstood. It's misunderstood by people who watch our videos, and when we talk about self-reliance and meeting our own needs, some people believe we're saying that we have this kind of unrealistically stoic, isolated relationship where I don't need nothing from nobody. And you know that's hogwash. We don't believe that. In fact, we wouldn't have a community of support for other men if we believed that none of us have needs that ever come from other people. And so let's clarify this a little bit, okay? There are needs that your partner has, and I want you to start thinking about all of them. In fact, it would be really helpful, maybe if she'll do it, to make a list of those needs. And if she won't, just write a list of what she says her needs are. And you're going to find something on there if you look carefully. There are two kinds of needs. And this is where I think you're running into some challenge, because you're believing that there's only one kind of need and all of her needs are her responsibility. And I think that would be a mistake in a relationship, because there are two kinds of needs that appear in relationship dynamics between a husband and wife and partners. There are dependency-based needs and there are support-based needs. Now, I've said this a number of times. I think to you, I've said it in the community a lot. It's a common refrain and mantra a lot, is dependency does not equal support, and support does not equal dependency. They're two very different things. A dependency-based need is an ongoing need, whereas a support-based need is temporary. So I like to use the example, a dependency-based need would be just for my partner to say, I no longer want to drive. I want you to drive me. And for no other reason than they just don't want to have to fiddle with driving. They don't want to be responsible for that. That would be a dependency need. If my partner broke a foot, especially their right foot, and said, I can't drive for a little while because I broke my foot, would you please drive for me? That's a support-based need. You see the difference? They're two different things. One of them asks me to be responsible for something that they really can and should be responsible for themselves as a mature adult, while the other is not about maturity. It's not about a desire to do anything. It's just the circumstances have created an opportunity where they need support. And so the nature of the request is different. The nature of the need is different. I'm looking at my notes here, so you might see me look down here and there. Dependency-based needs are relieving responsibility for the long term, and support-based needs are relieving discomfort or pain for the short term. You see the difference? Dependency is like looking to have you relieve from me responsibility, where support is asking to relieve momentary pain or discomfort, such as that broken foot. The request for a dependency-based need is rooted in a self-limiting belief, okay? Which means the person is asking you because they have a self-limiting belief that prevents them believing that they can source their own need. Whereas a support-based need is sourced in limiting circumstances. So dependency, limiting belief; support, limiting circumstances. You see the difference? Let's talk about another one. Dependency is fueled and created, is fueled by and creates hard emotions. So when someone has a dependency-based need and they come to you, there's usually an emotional charge behind it that's rather unpleasant for the person who has the need, but also on the recipient. So it kind of flows out with this anger and hostility, like, why aren't you doing this thing? The person is feeling hard things, and the way they express that is usually not very favorable and helpful towards resolution. In fact, it usually produces defensiveness and a little bit of shields up and arguing from the person they're speaking to. I would say, though, that a support-based need it usually creates feelings of gratitude and thankfulness, right? Like when somebody comes to me and they just want my support, the spirit behind that, the emotional energy is not like, it's not a minefield that is inviting me to like come in and get my limbs blown off, right? It's usually done appreciatively. It's done respectfully. It's like, hey, I have this short-term, temporary need of relief because of these extenuating circumstances. And boy, it would mean so much to me if you would support me. You know the difference with this relationally, right? Then you have dependency being rooted in victimization. And that's a horrible way to live as a person, to live in a disempowered state of victimization. Whereas support is not rooted in victimization. It's rooted in actually self-reliance and a desire to be more responsible, but unable to do so maybe because of, again, circumstances. I think this is actually really common, for example, in a late stage relationship with somebody who has an illness. You know, sometimes, especially as people age, maybe one partner, like they don't want to be frail, they don't want to need support. They're not necessarily feeling victimized, but they are in a hard spot. And so here too, the emotional energy behind their request or behind their need is not one of like, hey, it's your job to meet my need. It's like, boy, I really wish I could be doing this myself, but I can't. I need support. They're both needs, but one is different than the other. Let's see what else I've got here in my notes. The dependency is, to put this in some of the 4 roles from the Renewed Masculine Man course and also the drama triangle. When a person has a dependency need, they are a victim looking for a hero. When somebody is living with a need that is support driven, they are a hero looking for a guide. And so when someone is a victim looking for a hero, that requires rescue. Whereas somebody who's saying, I'm a hero, I don't need you to rescue me, I just need some guidance, they're not looking for rescue. They're looking for relief. They might be looking for encouragement, but they're not looking for you to fix their problem. They're looking for support. And support is much different than taking the ownership of somebody's insides. So what else do I have here? Oh, here's one. For me, and I can't speak for everybody, but I think it's a pretty common pattern. When someone comes to me with a dependency-based need, I usually have my own emotional reaction to it. I think we as humans have an instinct, most of us, to get a bit prickled by someone inviting us, or demanding rather, that we meet their dependency-based needs, because it's dishonoring, and just there's part of us that knows it's not appropriate for me to do that. And so I personally oftentimes have an agitated, angry feeling, which I understand in myself to be my body's way of telling me that I am being, somebody's trying to pull me into a dependency that doesn't feel right. And so if I were to somehow ignore that and still try to meet their dependency, I'm probably going to have a hard emotion like resentment, anger, hostility, frustration, contempt. And why I'm going to do that is because I have to step out of my integrity and authenticity, which means I'm doing something I don't really want to do, which is not to have good boundaries, but to get pulled into an arrangement that I don't agree with. And I find in myself and in the countless men I talk to, when a man leaves his authentic truth and integrity to do something he doesn't want to do, he's doing it because there's some sort of dependency involved, and his little brain is calculating a reward for violating himself. And yet the reward is almost always emotional upset, and we get frustrated and resentful that we had to do something. That's a horrible way to live. Whereas when I meet this support-based needs of my wife or partner or children or anybody, I feel good because I'm acting out of my value system. I'm supporting them because I love them and I love to be that person. I'm not rescuing them. I'm guiding them. I'm offering them encouragement. I'm offering them whatever they need to restore themselves to their rightful place as the owner and guide or hero in their own life. And so my emotional experience is different. And I believe most often, but not always, their emotional experience will be different. So I think we can understand our emotions as good indicators if somebody is making a dependency-based need request from us or a support-based need. All right, I mentioned this before, I believe, but a dependency-based need will be presented in a drama triangle. Now, I'm not going to explain the drama triangle in this video. There's copious videos on the internet about it. I would encourage you to look it up if you're not familiar with it. But you will see the dynamics of the drama triangle. You'll have a victim who is telling you either that you're a bad XYZ because you're not rescuing, or will invite you to rescue. It's very easy once you understand the pattern to see when someone is living in that and inviting you into it. And again, you'll probably have a hard emotional experience that is your body's warning sign not to get into that with them. And you already know when you step into a drama triangle, it is emotional upheaval, it's emotionally expensive, and it's not enjoyable. When somebody is more maturely making a support-based need, their request, they're generally going to do it even accidentally from an empowerment dynamic, which is the antidote to the drama triangle. When somebody does that, it's very clear that they're not a victim who's asking you for rescue. As I mentioned earlier, they're a person that sees themselves as a creator. They see themselves as owning their life. They see themselves as responsible, but they're just needing a little extra boost. They're not asking you to rescue. They're asking you to guide, assist, coach, or challenge. And that's a healthy thing to do. And so I would generally say that, just to kind of, I wish I had some visuals here, and I'll work on getting better with that. When you have these two stages of marriage, you have the Eros stage and you have the Agape stage. The Eros stage is fraught with drama triangles. And so there's a lot of hurt feelings, there's a lot of demands, there's a lot of expectations and entitlement, because the person is feeling victimized and that the villain or persecutor in their story is failing to deliver on providing that need. That's just kind of an overall summary of what I would call that Eros stage of marriage and relationship. When you move into, and it's actually a necessary tool to move into, the Agape stage, you first have to have an internal experience and transformation in yourself as a man, where you lay aside Eros and you pick up Agape / unconditional high regard. Then you have to learn from that place to live in that empowerment dynamic where you no longer see yourself as a victim, you see yourself as a creator, and where you start to learn, oh, when somebody tries to pull me into the drama triangle and they're putting me in the persecutor role, I'm not going to play that game. I'm going to respond instead of react as the challenger, which means I'm going to have good boundaries. I'm going to hang on to myself. I'm going to resist shame and blame and judgment from someone else, not by being nasty, but by just knowing, no, it's not true. This person's greater need is that they have a need and they don't see themselves as empowered to meet that need. And so a challenger holds a mirror up of sorts and says, sweetheart, I hear what you need, and I know it. And I know it looks like I would be the most rational, source to have that need met. But wouldn't that be disempowering? Like, if I met that need, are you going to feel good? Because, I think really well of you, and I know that you have what it takes to meet that need. And you have to kind of go back and let your partner know that they've got to own that in themselves. That is if they're asking you to meet a dependency-based need. And then that's the challenger role, right? A coach would do similar, but the coach is really the antidote to someone inviting you to be the rescuer. And you're saying, no, I won't hit the ball for you, but I'll show you how to hit the ball better, right? That's a person who is also kind of reflecting back to their lover. Hey, it would be really disempowering for me to rescue you because you'll still be disempowered if I do it for you. And I don't think that serves you in the long run. And so how about this? How about I give you a nice cold glass of water right now, and then let's walk together to where the well is, and I'll show you how to get water from the well yourself. Okay, that would be like a coaching example. Now, I know these are metaphorical, but I want you to understand them in their principle, and the metaphor kind of helps with that. So let's talk about, in this particular issue, your wife saying, I need connection. This is an interesting one, because I would suggest and agree that we all need connection. But I believe and have experienced that we have been wrongfully taught that connection comes to us from other people. And so I would see that as a self-limiting belief. And there's some caveats to that I'll explain in a moment. And so when somebody comes to me and says, I don't feel connected, and you've got to start making me feel connected, my ears hear that primarily as a dependency-based need. Although words are imprecise, and so sometimes it might be that a woman is just asking for support, and that's reasonable to me. And so connection, I could do a whole other video about connection, but my overall experience is when we feel disconnected as a human, judgment is present. Well, let me say that again. When I feel disconnected as a human, judgment is present. But in a relationship, interestingly, judgment can have two sources. I could be judging my wife. And if I'm judging my wife, my experience is she will feel disconnected. Why? Because I have put a barrier of judgment between us. Me. Now, if she comes to me and says, I feel disconnected, the very first thing I do as a man is I look inward and I say, am I judging my wife? Am I hanging on to any kind of expectation that she be something other than she is right now? Am I not accepting her in some way? And sometimes that's exactly the case. I have to repent of that of sorts and say, yeah, you caught me. I have been kind of caught up in my head about you and maybe holding you to an impossible standard or wishing something was different. All of those are some form of judgment. They all basically hold up a version of my wife and compare the person in front of me to her and say, sorry, darling, you don't measure up. That is what it means to judge your spouse. And there is no path to connection when we're doing that. And so if my wife says, hey, I'm disconnected, I check me first, because maybe I'm doing that. But you know what? Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I just check myself and I say, no judgment. And that's a good indicator to me that she's judging. You see, if my wife is living in a story that where she's telling herself or ruminating on, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I'm inadequate, I'm too much this, not enough that, he probably thinks this, I've heard it all in 32 years. But if my wife is ruminating on that in life in general, having nothing to do with me, if she's living in self-judgment, she will be disconnected. And it's very common that she would attribute, especially being in the Eros side of the relationship and or stuck in a drama triangle, in her belief system, she'll believe that I am the creator of her disconnection, when in reality, she is. I can't walk around judging myself and feel connected because I disconnect from what I judge. So if I judge me, I disconnect from me. And when I disconnect from me, I don't feel connected. And when I don't feel connected and I live in a belief system where other people make and create my connection, I feel like a victim, a disempowered victim. And so you have to kind of know all these possibilities when you're in a relationship with a woman who feels disconnected. Sometimes you can absolutely address it by identifying and resolving any judgment you're holding. And this is a good reason for a man to not judge, right? If you want a connected, intimate relationship with the woman in your life, be accepting. Let go of judgment, blame, hostility, all that. If you have those hard emotions, by the way, towards a woman in your life, you're not an accepting man. You're a judging man. And I don't mean that in a shaming way, just that like those are evidence that you have dependency on your partner, and your emotions are your response to not feeling like your dependency-based needs are being provided. And so that's the very first step as a man, is address those. You must be free of dependency-based needs on your partner, not support-based needs, dependency-based needs. Those will kill your connection and relationship, because inevitably your partner cannot meet those things. Why? Because they're not met in you, they're met in them. Same with me, right? If I want, for example, my wife to create happiness, and I believe it comes from her, I will absolutely eventually judge that why isn't she creating my happiness? Damn it. And I'll have hard emotions because I will feel frustrated that happiness is not coming from outside of me into me. That's a dependency-based need pattern. And as soon as I get that feeling that she's not meeting my needs, I'll judge, disconnection. Okay? If I judge myself, if I'm telling myself, oh, you blew it, you're such a piece of blah, 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 and my insides are hostile to self, if I'm rejecting myself, if I'm imagining a better version of me and saying, boy, you blew it because you're not like him today, I'm judging, and I'll disconnect from myself. And I might misunderstand that my disconnection that I feel is not about my wife. It's that I'm not connected with me. And so I want you to keep all this in mind as you're thinking about the things your wife is saying to you. There could be some truth in it. If you're judging her, you need to let that go. If you're not judging her and you're confident in that, then you need to reflect back to her as a strong, confident man who knows himself that, hey, I see you're feeling disconnected. I empathize with it, and express some compassion and be with her, but also at the same time refuse to own the emotional pain of other people unless you really are creating it, and you know when you're creating it because you know that was your intention. If I try to piss you off and you get pissed off, I'm responsible, right? If I am acting innocently and lovingly, and you still get pissed off, I don't own that. I can't be responsible for that. You are. Because at the end of the day, as adults, I own my emotions and my reactions to the world around me. I do, right? And so we can all learn to improve that way. I recognize how difficult this is in your spot. This is a tremendously painful part of marriage to go through. You're doing it, though. This is going to be where you grow actually in strength and durability of unconditional high regard as you learn to keep holding someone in unconditional high regard who is basically treating you with transactionality. Now, a lot of people will be like, well, why should you do that? Here's why. Because if someone treats you with transactional love and you respond in transactional love, you're just being a transactional lover. That's what everybody does. That's not especially difficult to do. There's no virtue in that. If you give me $1 and I give you $1 back, I'm not generous because I return to you the $1 that you gave me. But that's exactly how we tend to make relationships happen. But if I say, you know what, here is something I love to give. I don't care if you give me anything or not, right? Then it's a different way. Now, again, that's not without boundaries. That's not without a container of commitment in a relationship, these kind of things. Stuff I don't want to recapitulate in this video. I've talked about it ad nauseum in other videos. But hopefully you've gotten a big picture of where you're at, that you're oriented to these 3 stages, that you're in the middle stage where you're transitioning from one phase of marriage to the latter phase. Your partner's not there yet. They're perhaps a little bit behind you. And it just takes a lot of patience and understanding and grace in the process. But it also takes a willingness to see that this stage is necessary for you. It's actually beneficial for your own maturity. And so I hope you've gotten something out of that. I'm looking forward to your questions, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.